Now, I'm not a huge fan of NASCAR. Today, the cars share a little resemblance to the cars that rolled off the assembly line, and to me, that's something that makes the early 60s and 70s of NASCAR racing unique. The cars that raced on Sunday bore a striking resemblance to those that were sold in dealer showrooms. And as automakers soon realized, win on Sunday, sell on Monday, as coined by Bob Tasca Sr., a Ford dealer and drag racing legend. Now, because racing success translated into sales success, automakers were putting big bucks into racing programs. And that's what made this era so interesting. There's a ton of innovation and unique design, including what I love best, the Aero Warriors. The Aero Warriors was an aerodynamic arms race between Ford and Chrysler during the 1960s that reached its climax during 1968 and 1970. It produced some of the most unique cars ever built, including my favorite, the 1969 Dodge Charger Daytona. So let's dig into this unique era of NASCAR. The start of the Aero Warriors program can arguably be traced back to 1964, when Chrysler reintroduced the Hemi to racing with the 426 Hemi. On February 23, 1964, the 426 Hemi powered cars made their debut at the start of the NASCAR season at the Daytona 500. The end result, the Hemi powered Mopars occupied 5 of the top 10 spots, including first, second, third, and led the race for 198 of 200 laps. Mopars would have occupied 6 of the top 10 spots if Bobby Isaac and his 1964 Corvette didn't run out of fuel at lap 189. Throw in a new average speed record set by Petty at 154.334 miles per hour and a top speed record set by Paul Goldsmith at 174.91 miles per hour, and you had a hell of a day. Overall, Chrysler won 26 of 62 races in 1964, and Richard Petty was the Grand National Champion. That's nearly 42% of all races, a significant number. In the 1965 race year, the Hemi was banned because NASCAR said the motor wasn't readily available to the average buyer. With its introduction to 1966 model year cars, the Hemi made its return to NASCAR and continued its domination.
I'm back, baby!
Winning 34 of 49 races in the 1966 season that was boycotted by Ford, and 36 of 49 races in the 1967 season, with David Pearson winning the 66 championship in his Dodge and Petty winning again in 1967 with his Plymouth. With Chrysler dominating NASCAR, Ford had to do something. NASCAR wasn't budging on allowing its exotic 427 cubic inch overhead cam motor, so Ford turned to another weapon to improve its racing fortunes and kicked off the Aero Warriors era of NASCAR. Most automakers kicked off 1968 with plenty of redesigns of their existing models. Some of the most iconic cars from the era of 68s, the Charger, the GTO, Chevelle, Roadrunner, were all either redesigned or launched in 1968, and Ford was no exception. The intermediate line from Ford and Mercury was headlined by the Fairlane and the Comet, which were also the cars raced in NASCAR. While in 1968, the redesigned Cyclone and the newly developed Torino were taking over. The Torino and Mercury Cyclone now sported a gently sloped fastback roof that extended all the way to the rear end. Their front ends were made smaller, and the tail panel was made concave. The changes proved to be a drastic improvement in aerodynamics. So how did the changes pan out for 1968? Well, the Ford and Mercury teams ended up winning 27 of 49 races, and Cale Yarborough in his 1968 Mercury Cyclone smashed the 1967 Daytona 500 speed record of 180.831 miles per hour by hitting 189.222 miles per hour, a massive leap from the 1967 year. It was clearly evident that the 1968 Dodge Charger and Plymouth Roadrunners were struggling with their redesigned bodies. It was reported that the grills caused so much drag and turbulence that the front ends would lose grip at high speeds. Chrysler, seeing how bad their 68 lineup was performing on the track, decided to bring in rocket scientists from Chrysler's missile division to study the aerodynamic issues with their cars. Wind tunnel tests confirmed what drivers were reporting. The recessed grille and rear windshield were disastrous. The front end was causing too much air to get under the car, and whatever air that was going over swirled over the back. It was suggested that the grille be made flush along with the rear window, and to add a chin spoiler. So engineers redesigned the Charger. NASCAR head Bill France met with the Chrysler team to inspect their revised Charger. The only thing that France objected to was a chin spoiler. Like I said, NASCAR wanted cars that looked stock and not like race cars. Chrysler's rocket scientist John Pointer pointed out that the pace car Camaro had a chin spoiler, and so the car was approved. And with that, the 1969 Dodge Charger 500 was born, Chrysler's first entry into the Aero Warriors. The memo went out on July 18th to dealers, letting them know that a very limited edition 1969 Charger 500 would be available. Unfinished 69s were sent to Creative Industries, who installed the Charger 500 modifications. The grille, front spoilers, rear window plugs, and chrome A-pillar covers were all different. Base price of $3,843 with a 440 and $4,491 with a Hemi. Chrysler sold an estimated 392 of these cars, somehow getting past NASCAR's 500 minimum rule. With the new Charger 500 being made available for the 1969 race year, Richard Petty asked Chrysler to switch from a Roadrunner to the Charger. The Roadrunner was just that bad, and Petty recognized that the Charger 500 was Chrysler's only offering that was going to have a chance. But for whatever reason, Chrysler was insistent he stay with Plymouth. Not happy with the response, Petty announced on November 25, 1968, that after 10 years with Plymouth, he would be switching to Ford for the 1969 race year. Ford didn't stop and rest on its laurels either. They dove head-on into further aerodynamic improvements. Ford teamed up with Holman Moody and improved on its already aerodynamic Torino and Cyclone, and came out with the new Ford Torino Talladega and Mercury Cyclone Spoiler 2, which debuted on February 1, 1969 at the Motor Trend 500. The cars that many considered to be Ford's first official Aero Warriors. The front end was extended 6 inches and was given a 30-degree slope to help keep airflow on top of the car. The fenders were obviously extended to match, and the grille was made flush with the fenders and voids were sealed up with rubber to reduce drag. The front bumper was dumped and they replaced it with a modified rear bumper so that it would help provide downforce at top speeds. New rocker panels were produced, and they were 1 inch higher than the originals. This was done because NASCAR had rules for ride height, which were based on measurements from the rocker panels to the ground. So by making the rocker sit higher, Ford was actually able to make the whole car sit 1 inch lower. The cars would only be available in one trim and 3 different colors. As per NASCAR rules, Ford would have to build a minimum of 500 cars for the new version to be eligible to race. There's this great story from Ralph Moody about the production of these cars. Apparently in early 1969, Bill France became suspicious when he wasn't seeing many of these cars in the showrooms. So he went to pay a visit to the assembly line and see what's up. The team offered Bill France the option to count each car as they drove it past him. Given the very limited options, 1 trim and 3 colors, the team was able to drive the same handful of cars past him repeatedly until Bill was satisfied that the production numbers were on track. In the end, Ford would build its about 750 or so cars, but the fast one they pulled on Bill France bought them time they needed to do so. So how did the new Torino Talladega perform at the Motor Trend 500? Well, Ford took 7 of the top 10 finishes, including 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and Richard Petty finished 1st overall. Daytona was no different, with 6 of the top 10 finishes being Ford and Leroy Yarborough winning. The 1969 race season was shaping up to be pretty one-sided. As Talladega approached, Ford and Mercury won 26 of 43 races. Dodge managed to get the top spot 15 times, but what was telling is that Plymouth never graced the top of the podium once. It was clear that aerodynamics was playing a huge role, and Ford was dominating in that area. But for now, we're going to pause there. In part 2, we'll cover the rise of the wing cars and the remainder of the 69 through 71 seasons. So remember, hit the like, subscribe, and bell so you don't miss when part 2 drops. Until then, take it easy, guys.